You received a call from an inmate at the Department of Corrections. This call will be recorded and monitored. If you wish to block any future calls of this nature, dial 7 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call, hang up.
Well, hello, Mary. How are you? Oh, yeah, I'm doing very well. Doing very well. Having a really good weekend, so I'm not going to complain. So, how's everything going over there in the big house? Yeah, I've heard that stuff. I mean, I'm excited that they have a bill out there to make the e-messaging and the phone call free, but I'm really concerned about how they're going to use this new feature because it's a possibility that they could use it as a tool for discipline or something. You know that because I've had many instances where people were restricted from using e-messaging and restricted from using the phone, and a loved one would die because nobody could send them a message to let them know that somebody was in a hospital or in an accident or actually had passed away. And sending snail mail, it takes a little while, but at least there's a way of communicating. I know years ago that's all I did was just the phone and the mail. But cutting back on that, saying that you were caught with contraband and so you can't use your phone for 6 months. That no, because right now people can't. If they don't have the money, they can't really take a lot of calls, and maybe they have to limit them. And I know the FCC came down and secure us about the high cost that they have for their because they pretty much have a monopoly. You have to use their email service and you have to use their phone. And if the and it's not supposed to be this way, but if the prison says just shut the phone down, they'll do it without question. They won't tell anybody. And I know that from personal experience. So I'm glad I'm going through my little ban of no mail and no e-messaging and no phone and no visitation. I mean, they just cut me off completely, but I learn a lot about their process. And when I go to their website and read things about how they want to engage the inmates with their loved ones and how it helps in rehabilitation, other prisons, yeah, but in the state of Washington, no. I mean, this isn't just confined to one facility, and that's the one I have the most problems with, but it's confined to the entire Washington State Department of Corrections. They're actually covering for all of this. Oh no. I can still contact people. They're they'll enforce things or they'll put restrictions on stuff, but they have no way of enforcing it. Let's put it that way. It's like making a law against spitting on the sidewalk and expecting there to be enough officers out there to keep people from spitting on the sidewalk. And same thing goes with weapons. The person sits there and says, we can't buy automatic weapons in the state. They'll just make one, or they'll buy them on the black market. And I've had several people tell me how that can be done. And then when I was in law enforcement, I know how it can be done too. So the people who violate the law, they're not going to be
You have
suddenly
60 seconds remaining.
following it. So I don't know who they think they're fooling by putting all these restrictions and stuff on people, but they think it's going to work. And so I'm going to continue to broadcast from my personal experiences and from the experiences that are shared with me because people are sending me messages from my YouTube channel. And so I can get an insight on what's going on with loved ones and with the prison system.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
No, I'm not opposed to them making the communication free. I just don't want them putting it as a form of punishment. That should just not even be on the table. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people who have limited contact. And so what they're doing is because people can't afford it, they're not talking to their loved ones, and then also because they're punishing them. So is this really a punishment? It's more or less like, oh well, doesn't change as much.
Thank you for using inmate call. Goodbye.
Hello, welcome to AQS Inmate Call, and I'm your host, Joel Wilborn. Now, I recently posted a video on my YouTube channel about the myths of uh, of the DOC, and there's quite a few of them, but I just kind of focused on a few, well, on a select number, we'll say. And so you have to think, what do you think of the DOC? Do you think it's a good organization? Do you think it's a bad organization? And that video debunks some of the myths. And so it shines some pretty good light on the Department of Corrections because generally they do a pretty good job. But on occasion, you'll have something like the Dublin Federal Prison, and then you'll have things like the Washington Correction Center for Women. And these prisons, they're not perfect. But I'm not going to all out criticize every prison in the United States because not all of them are these bad organizations. Some of them are run pretty well. I do look at management. In humans, they have their faults and they make mistakes and they learn from their mistakes. And I'm beginning to think that some of these people aren't learning from their mistakes. So I want to draw these mistakes out. Now, just to get on focus here, let's say the purpose of a prison. And I'm sure you have in your mind why a prison exists. Now, you have rehabilitation versus punishment. Some people believe prisons should focus on rehabilitating offenders, providing education, therapy, and skills to help them reintegrate into society. Others see prisons primarily as a means of punishment and deterrence, emphasizing retribution for crimes committed. And then public safety. Many view prisons as necessary for protecting society from dangerous individuals. Now, you have to focus on the effectiveness. Skepticism. There is often skepticism about whether prisons effectively reduce crime or recidivism rates. Critics argue that the current system may perpetrate cycles of crime rather than prevent them. There's overcrowding and conditions. Concerns about overcrowding, poor living conditions, and violence within prisons are common, leading to debates about humane treatment and the need for reform. The effectiveness is why I'm here. This is why I do these podcasts. This is why I have my web channel up. Because I do believe that people are going in and coming out like Clyde Barr, Bonnie and Clyde. And then you have alternatives to incarceration, which I heavily promote. Restorative justice. Some advocate for restorative justice programs which focus on repairing harm caused by criminal behavior through reconciliation and community involvement rather than incarceration. And non-custodial services. There's growing support for alternatives like probation, community service, or electronic monitoring for non-violent offenders. I'm all for that. And then this one is a big one too that you can see in the news. Racial and social economic disparities, criticism of bias. Many people are critical of the disappropriate incarceration of marginalized groups, particularly racial minorities, and those from low-income backgrounds. This has fueled discussions about systematic racism and inequality in the criminal justice system. And then there's the cost, taxpayer burden. The high cost of maintaining prisons is a concern for many, leading to debates about whether resources could be better spent on prevention, education, or social services. And then you have the political and media influence. Tough on crime rhetoric. Politicians and media often shape public opinion by emphasizing tough on crime policies, which can lead to support for harsher sentencing and increased incarceration. And awareness of reform efforts. Conversely, documentaries, news stories, and advocacy campaigns have raised awareness about the need for prison reform and the human impact of incarceration. Now, victim perspectives, desire for justice. Victims of crime and their families may view prisons as a necessary means of achieving justice and closure. and mixed feelings. Some victims advocate for rehabilitation and restorative justice, while others prioritize punishment and public safety. Now, on the victim perspectives, I can't argue with the victim. I'm not going to blame a rape victim for being attacked because of the way she dressed or the people she hung out with or getting involved with drugs. That's not an excuse for committing a crime, and it certainly doesn't make a victim like you were asking for it. That's impossible. But when victims are very upset that somebody who murdered a loved one is just getting 10 years, that's a concern. And we really need to look into something like that. Now, the global perspectives, varied approaches, public opinion can differ significantly between countries. For example, Nordic countries with the focus on rehabilitation have more positive views of their prison systems compared to countries with harsher punitive approaches. And moral and ethical concerns, human rights, many people are concerned about the ethical implications of incarcerations, particularly regarding the treatment of prisoners and the potential for abuse within the system. Second chances, there is often moral debate about whether individuals who have committed crimes deserve a second chance and how society should balance forgiveness with accountability. Now, as a prison advocate, I have seen this all these things pop up out there, especially on the political campaign, because we elected a president who is a convicted felon. And for some reason, people are saying that he should not be president, and they just keep emphasizing that. I don't see him as a violent criminal. I don't see him as being somebody who is lower than society and doesn't deserve to live amongst us. I don't see him as someone who needs to be locked up for 15, 20 years. But there's people out there that just want to drag that out. And it makes the people who are actually trying hard, actually trying to make this system work, look bad. Imagine you have a neighbor who commits a terrible crime, turns himself in, and the judge says, okay, because you turned yourself in and you pled guilty on this one, I'm not going to give you the maximum. And gives him a sentence, instead of a 30-year sentence, gives him, let's say, a 5-year sentence. Now, the victims could be very upset, but they're able to get this person locked up. And then if the person goes to prison and let's say mentors other folks and uses some of the resources that we're paying money for and gets out and you never hear from that person again, that's a good thing. It's like we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's up for nomination for a position in the cabinet. And people are saying that, well, his cousin actually said that he was addicted to drugs, and she wanted to emphasize that this drug addiction is going to ruin his life. Now he's been clean and sober for over 20 years, and why his cousin would want to go out there and say because he did a bad thing, got into a bad situation, and was able to pull himself out, he cannot be trusted to do anything in society anymore. That right there, that's like a stab in the back. That is terrible because there are a lot of people out there, and that's one of the things that got me involved in this because I was doing undercover work and I was waiting for a drug deal to come by, and I just asked my informant. Well, she wasn't my informant; she was an unwitting informant. But I was asking her why did you get into this field? And her answer just blew me away because I always thought these drug dealers and users were just bad people, but they're not. They just got into a bad situation. And a lot of them were just influenced by people that they had trusted. And we want them to be converted so they can go out. And if they talk to one person and save that one person's life, that's worth it. And that's better than having them say, well, I can't blend back into society, so I need to go back to my old ways. We're proving to them that they're not accepted by society. And that's not the truth. We do want them back. We do trust them. So why do this? Why even go through that? But there it is. Recent headlines, and there they are. So to continue on with this, we've got one of the things, and I would hardly really call this a myth though, but prisons prioritize rehabilitation over punishment. That's what we want to believe, but they don't. And we want, if a person's caught and they go to prison, they should come out a better person. I mean, I can't really find too many people that disagree with that, but I do find people that say they should stay in prison. And so when I see something like this about the rehabilitation, I want to jump on board because in the state of Washington, they got a budget of like $2 billion just for the DOC. And that could be used for a whole bunch of different things. I think they should emphasize rehabilitation, which includes reducing the cost or eliminating the cost of communication. I'm over 300 miles away from the women's prison. I would drive out there once a month. And they do offer some compensation for that, which they should. And when people do come from great distances or they do have to spend a lot of money on the phone calls, you have to look at the end. Is this worth it? And keeping a person in contact with the outside world, the people who can actually influence them to live a better life, we should emphasize that by all means. Now, in the state of Washington, that budget, let's look at it like this, the healthcare services. Now, we were talking about how rehabilitation is important. There's also this myth about having great healthcare. You know, I think during the campaign, they were talking about transgender people going in there and having the full operation to do the full transition. Well, when you talk to the people, even the transgender people who do that, there's a lot that's not so good about it. So the healthcare services, the budgeted amount is $269 million in the state of Washington. And roughly they've spent about $105 million of it already. The prison operations, the correctional operations, budgeted $771 million. Okay? This is $771 million for staff and for services associated with prison officials. $771 million was set aside for that. They've spent about $320 million 2025 so far. Compare that to the healthcare. $269 million. That's less than half. And that's what they figure we need to spend on the health of these people that the courts decided needed to be in prison and not on an ankle bracelet or in some kind of rehabilitation service. And these are people who could very well have chronic illnesses. They could be injured from maybe a police chase or something, or they could have, let's say, maybe the gender change that they want to do, or they could have an addiction that pretty much put them on that downward spin, like maybe an addiction to alcohol or fentanyl. And we've been seeing these things show up in the prisons. And so you would think they would try to cut back on that. They should be relatively healthy in the prison and come out, and then everything has to be on their own. But if we cut back on the cigarette smoking, cut back on the alcohol and the drugs, yeah, maybe we're on the right step. And then there's correctional industries. $11 million on that one, $4 million so far. Correctional industries is supposed to give people a job within the prison that will help them when they get out. And janitorial service, that's fine. One of my friends, she said she's working in the library. She prefers to work with dogs, training them, helping them out with you know the like the to comfort people or to train them so that they won't they'll be a lot better of a pet, house training and maybe sitting and begging and eating right and stuff. She really enjoyed working with the dogs, and they had a program in there for that. But she didn't quite qualify, so she's working in a library, and she was like, "Yeah, I'll just sit in a library." But I told her that's an exciting job because she's around the book, she gets to interact with people, and she's learning something. Although that's not really what she said in her interview on my YouTube channel, but it's something that's a job and it gives her responsibility and she can earn money, even though it is $1 an hour. And then she has to pay, for all her phone and email services. So correctional industries, they get this low budget. And maybe that's one of the reasons why some of the officers don't treat these people well within correctional industries. I don't know. There's a lot that needs to be looked at. We had some people from the state of Washington go overseas and check with some of the European prisons, which have a low prison amount. They got so low that they actually would rent out their prisons because there was nobody to put in there. They actually worked on ways to keep people out of prison and didn't really need them. I would love to see that in the United States. But when they came back, nothing really was done. Now, recidivism in the state of Washington is on a decline. It was roughly, let's see, about 34% in 2015. Approximately 34% of the individuals released from prison committed another felony within 3 years. And then by 2020, this rate had decreased to 22%. Now, I was working a lot to fight recidivism in 2015 and 2020. And I've had people say that if they had talked to me before, they never would have committed the crime. So I would tell them, you can still talk to people. You can do some stuff on my YouTube channel and you can put the word out there. You can talk to people who are in there. You can get the word to family members. Keep talking. Don't think that because you're locked up, you can't do anything for people. And they're willing to do that. And some got out and went into the field to help folks. When I helped Paula Gardner win her $9.9 million lawsuit, she said, you'd be proud of me because I donated to charities. That helps her feel better. Now, Marianne Atkins, she paid her retribution, and then she's saving her money and she's using her talents to help other people. I'm glad she's doing that stuff, and that helps with recidivism. Also, when I'm talking to folks, I try to offer as much positive feedback as I can. It's hard to do when I've been restricted from talking to folks, but I still get it out there. I still have interviews that I did years ago that's still out there on my YouTube channel. And I can talk to family members that these folks have introduced me to, and I can still go through third party to communicate with them. And they're doing their best to shut me down. But when I have that mission in my mind, when there's something I want to accomplish, like a typical American, we can't be stopped. When we set our minds to a goal, and when you're on the side of right, you can't lose. It's impossible. Only the people that are on the dark side. And those who are sitting in that prison using rehabilitation tools as a weapon, they need to go. And I know the superintendent over there, they were telling me that when somebody got in trouble, let's say got written up for something, they would appeal to the superintendent who would somehow turn the blame on the inmates. And that's kind of like what I was talking about with the victim. These folks were made one of the correctional officers angry, and rather than listen to reason, they immediately want to um, get some kind of punishment going on them, because suddenly these correctional officers are saying, you're in here because you're being punished and there's really nothing you can do and the public doesn't care. So they would go to the superintendent to appeal, and the superintendent, more or less, they got this little rule that if the correctional officer didn't witness it, then it didn't happen. And so when I sent my package to my fiance and it was lost, I got compensated for my loss. It took a while to do it, but I got compensated. And I also got a little tag that I can put on the DOC that you guys lost a package that she asked me to send her. Paula Gardner asked me for money. She said, I need $25 so I can get some stuff. I sent the money to her. They took the money and said that I had paid another person or something. And I said, who did I pay? Never got an answer. They did kind of sugarcoat it and say that I had transferred stamps, e-messaging stamps, to somebody else, which was kind of hard to do because I was banned from using the system anyway. So I don't know. They just make stuff up, and they're defeating the whole purpose of the prison and rehabilitation. So there's a lot of myths that we need to debunk, and there's a lot of work that we need to do on this system. I am all for taking the cost of communication away from the families and away from the inmates. They make $1 an hour. Let them spend their money on something they actually can use in the prison. You know, if they need a new raincoat or some shoes, let them buy that instead of spending a large part of their money to talk to their family, which they shouldn't have to do in the first place. And with that cost out of the way, communication can go up. And then they can justify spending a bigger budget to get more staff members because you'll have a lot of phone calls, a lot of e-messaging, and probably a lot of breakdowns. And so you'll need more staff and stuff for that. And then people will be a lot more relaxed because they'll know what's going on out there. And communication with the outside world is extremely important. Nobody should be locked away from communication ever. And but my greatest fear is that they're going to use it as a weapon, and they're using it against me. There's nothing there's I can foresee that they're not going to use it against other people. Well, hopefully this starts some discussion with you, and that you can go out and make a difference. Don't think that you can't do anything to help reduce crime, because every little bit helps, and you have a lot more potential than you give yourself credit for, especially if you think that you can't reduce crime, because you can. Definitely. Well, go out and have yourself a marvelous day and make fantastic memories for tomorrow.